Remy Ma is a masterclass in patience, and by the time we reach the end of this breakdown, that sentence is going to hit harder than anything Papoose has recorded in the last 5 years. Because what we all just watched happen on the biggest podcast stage in the culture was not an interview. It was not a man clearing his name after a divorce filing. It was a 20-year brand being burned to the ground, and the craziest part of the whole thing is that Papoose struck the match himself, smiled for the cameras, and handed the gasoline to somebody who had no business holding a microphone in the first place. Before we go any further into this, I genuinely hope every single one of you is doing well, and to the loyal husband truthers we are going to be talking about today, the ones who are already typing paragraphs before the first minute of this video is even over, I hope your week gets better, because after this one drops, it is going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. This is going to be an interesting one, maybe one of the most interesting stories we have ever covered on this channel, because it is not really a music story. It is a story about what happens when a man spends 2 decades building an identity around one woman, and then tries to tear that identity down in a single afternoon. Now you already know what to do before we take one more step. Hit the like button and really hit it, because this video is going to travel, and when the defenders show up in the comments trying to rewrite what we all watched with our own eyes, I want the numbers sitting under this video to tell them exactly where the culture stands on this. And while you are down there, make sure you are subscribed with the bell on, because the way this story is moving, there is absolutely going to be a part 2, and you are not going to want to hear about it secondhand. But now, let me introduce you to the group that made all of this possible, because every empire of delusion has its foot soldiers. I am calling them the vow brokers. The vow brokers. These are the people who spent 20 years selling us Papoose, the loyal husband. Papoose, the man who waited. Papoose, the king of holding it down. And now those same people are scrambling to sell us Papoose the victim, Papoose the free man, Papoose the freshly inked bachelor, like the last 2 decades were just a trailer for whatever this is supposed to be. And honestly, I am trying to choose my words carefully here, but I have stopped caring, because what happened on that podcast set was the bottom of the bottom, and we are just going to walk through it. So here is what brought us to this moment. Papoose walked onto Drink Champs, sat down across from NORE, on what is genuinely one of the most important stages in hip-hop media, and he did not come alone. He came with a fresh, glossy, cinematic tattoo that the entire internet has been staring at for weeks. He came with a divorce filing he was more than happy to confirm out loud. And he came with a new woman at his side, a woman the timeline has been calling Clarissa, though half the internet still cannot agree on her actual name, because somehow the girlfriend has become the spokesperson before anybody even learned how to spell it. Think about how insane that is. 20 years of marriage to a Bronx legend, and the first person Papoose lets speak on the end of it is somebody who has been in the picture for 5 minutes. And then it happened. Right there, in front of the cameras, in front of a live audience, in front of the whole culture, the new partner leaned into the microphone and called Remy Ma's music trash. On loop, on record, on camera. And if that was not enough, she followed it with the sentence that is going to live on the internet forever. She told the world that if you are going to call him her husband, make sure you call her his ex. I need you to understand what that sentence actually is. That is not a slip. That is not a mistake. That is a title transfer performed live on the radio. She stripped Remy Ma of the word wife and tried to hand it to herself in one breath. And Papoose, 20-plus-year veteran Papoose, a man who knows exactly how a bar lands and exactly how a clip travels, sat 3 feet away and let every single word of it play. Because here is the thing about hip-hop. You can say a lot of things in this culture. You can call somebody corny, you can call them washed, you can call their rollout a disaster. But when your wife is a 2-time BET-honored Bronx icon, a woman with platinum plaques, arena dates, and verses people still quote word for word, you do not, under any circumstances, let your new girlfriend go on the biggest podcast in the culture and call her catalog trash. Because the second that happens, everybody understands the assignment. The words may have left her mouth, but the ammunition was loaded in his house. A girlfriend that knew does not speak. She whispers what she has been told to say. And every whisper on that episode had Papoose's fingerprints all over it. And just when you think the disrespect peaked on the podcast stage, the live stream happened. A fan hopped on a live with the new partner and asked her point blank whether she had ever listened to Remy Ma before any of this. And understand the context of that question, because Remy Ma has records that athletes walk out to. Records that boxers wrap their hands to. Records that grown men lace their sneakers up to before the biggest nights of their lives. So the fan wanted to know if the woman now sitting next to Papoose had ever, even accidentally, been caught vibing to the artist she just called trash. And her answer was no. She said she does not listen to trash music. She said Papoose was serious about her. And then she repeated the title transfer line one more time for the road. The whole room went silent. And that silence is the sound of a narrative flipping, because in that exact second, Remy Ma stopped being the ex-wife in this story and became a legend under attack. Now here is where the story turns, because Remy Ma did not do what the internet expected. Remy Ma did not hop on a live stream screaming. Remy Ma did not throw a chair or fire off a 2-minute rant. Remy Ma did what the most dangerous people in this culture always do. She sat down in a chair, stayed perfectly calm, and started explaining things. Coldly, precisely, with that Bronx surgeon energy. And what Remy Ma said on that microphone is worse for Papoose than any diss track she has ever recorded, because she did not rap it. She just said it plain. Remy Ma told the world that Papoose has been paranoid for years. Paranoid about athletes. Paranoid about rappers. Paranoid about executives. Paranoid about any man with a decent hairline, a decent job, or a decent bottle of cologne. She said she was never the cheater in that house. She said Papoose was the one watching every man who walked into every room. And then Remy Ma said the word that made the entire internet drop its coffee at the same time. Jealous. Not insecure. Not controlling. Jealous. Jealous of her career. Jealous of her stage. Jealous of her checks. Jealous of the fact that she can hop on a record with Griselda, drop a verse next to J. Cole, slide onto a Joe Budden track, and go right back to living her life while he grinds out project after project that the industry simply does not buy. And this is the part where the receipts start stacking, because Remy Ma pointed out something that reframed the entire divorce. She said Papoose spent a full calendar year dropping an album a month. 12 projects. 12 full projects in 12 months. And not one of them moved anything. Not a chart position, not a moment, not a conversation. Meanwhile, she is collecting money off music she recorded years ago. Catalog money, sync money, feature money, walkout money, the kind of quiet, passive income that lets a woman decline a bad deal because she does not need it. That gap, according to Remy Ma, is the real engine under everything we are watching. The tattoo, the girlfriend, the podcast, the filing, all of it. Because when a man is losing the money contest inside his own home, he does not fight for the money anymore. He fights for the story. And that is exactly what Papoose is doing. He is trying to rewrite the story in real time. Now I have to stop and ask you something before we get into the legal chapter of this mess. Because I want to see where the room is leaning. If you believe Remy Ma has always been the better rapper in that household, and honestly, at this point, it is not close, go ahead and leave a like on this video right now because I want that number sitting there like a scoreboard. And if you disagree, that is fine. The comments are open. Bring your best argument. Just know you are going to be doing cardio in that section all week. Let us talk about the loyal husband receipts, because this is where the contradiction becomes impossible to defend. This is Papoose we are talking about. The man whose entire career was built on devotion. The man who held Remy Ma down while she did her time. The man who wrote for her, raised a family with her, stood on every red carpet next to her, stitched his name to her so tightly that the culture stopped seeing two separate people. That was not a side detail of his brand. That was the brand. And that same man walked onto a national platform, confirmed the divorce himself, and nodded along while another woman called his wife's life's work garbage. In this culture, a nod is a signature. He heard it. He allowed it. He co-signed it without ever having to say a word. And the reason he did it that way is obvious. If Papoose calls her music trash himself, the culture eats him alive by dinner. But if the girlfriend says it with him sitting right there, he gets to walk it back later. That is her opinion. Do not put her words in my mouth. He gets a legal shield and a media shield in the same sentence. That is not a heat-of-the-moment mistake. That is a rollout. And rollouts do not get forgiven in hip-hop. Rollouts get archived. And here is the detail inside the detail that separates a real breakdown from a lazy recap. When you watch that episode back, watch Papoose's posture. He does not look like a man having a spontaneous conversation. He looks like a man executing talking points. He arrived with a preloaded version of the marriage. He arrived with a partner already briefed on her lines. That is not an interview. That is a press junket. And a press junket means weeks of planning, which means every ounce of disrespect aimed at Remy Ma was scheduled, rehearsed, and approved before a single camera turned on. Then there is Fat Joe. And when Fat Joe enters a story, you pay attention because Fat Joe is a broker. Fat Joe is a fixer. Fat Joe is the man who patches holes in this culture. And by Papoose's own admission on that very podcast, Fat Joe was one of the people who helped hold the Papoose and Remy Ma situation together back in the day. But now the reporting says the triangle has flipped. Papoose is once again at odds with Joe, and Remy Ma has made it crystal clear that she and Joe are family. That chapter is closed, and anybody trying to reopen it is running a distraction play from the real issue. And the real issue, in her words, said plain as day, is that the animosity was always about the music. The animosity was always about the numbers. She said every time an interviewer looked into a camera and asked who the better rapper was, she watched something collapse behind his eyes. He smiled through it. He laughed through it. But it cut him every single time for 20 straight years. That is not a diss. That is a diagnosis. And there is no walking a diagnosis back. And do not miss the chess being played on Remy Ma's side of the board, because every word she has spoken since that podcast aired has been weighed on a scale. She knows this story ends up in court, maybe divorce court, maybe defamation court, and definitely the courtroom of public opinion, and she is building a record in real time. Every clip is careful. Every sentence is measured. Remember who we are talking about here. This is a woman who has been through the system, came home, rebuilt her name, rebuilt her career, and rebuilt her family from nothing. She knows exactly how to talk when the cameras are rolling, and right now she is talking with the calm of a woman who has already counted the money and already read the verdict. And then came the paperwork, because there is always paperwork. Papoose's attorney reportedly fired off a cease and desist at Remy Ma, demanding she pull content, stop referencing him in certain ways, back off certain narratives. And listen, a cease and desist in hip-hop is almost never a courtroom weapon. It is a press release wearing a suit. It is an attempt to control a story you have already lost control of. And how did Remy Ma answer it? Did she shrink? Did she delete anything? No. She went to the booth. She answered a legal threat with a studio session. She dropped new music on top of the letter like the letter was a coaster. That is not a woman who is scared. That is a woman who is booked, busy, and completely unbothered. In the culture we come from, that is the equivalent of the bell ringing for round 2 and your opponent refusing to sit down between rounds. Papoose, whether he understands it yet or not, walked himself into a 12-round fight against a woman who has never lost a round in her life. Now let me zoom out for a second because this fight is bigger than two people. Look at the timeline we are living in. We have watched Cardi B and Nicki Minaj keep a feud alive for what feels like a decade. We have watched Meg and Latto trade jabs, Doja and Ice Spice trade weirder ones, and now we are watching one of the longest marriages in hip-hop history collapse on camera. Female rappers are being asked to defend their legacies in public every single week of this year, and every fight becomes fuel for the machine. Remy Ma is not just defending a marriage here. She is defending a borough, a catalog, and a 20-year head start on everybody coming for her spot. And that is why this one hits different. Papoose is not a rival. Papoose is a husband. Or was. And the second a husband walks into a public feud with his own wife using another woman as the weapon, the culture does not just watch. The culture judges. Because everybody knows this story. Everybody knows a man who could not handle his woman's light. We do not see celebrities in this clip. We see mirrors. That is why every comment section under every video about this story is 10,000 deep. It is not gossip. It is a case study. And we have to say something about the venue itself because the stage matters. Drink Champs is not some corner vlog with a ring light. It is one of the few platforms in this culture where legends go to write their own history in long form. People have used that table to bury hatchets, to celebrate eras, to give flowers. Papoose looked at that stage, the stage built for toasts and legacy talk, and decided to use it as a firing squad for his own marriage. The disrespect was not just in the words. It was in the venue selection. He picked the loudest room in the culture and whispered the coldest thing he could find into its microphone. What Papoose pulled on that set, walking in with a scripted story and a spokesperson waiting in the wings, is the relationship version of a franchise quarterback demanding a trade, holding the press conference in his new team's jersey, and then standing there confused about why the old fan base set his jersey on fire in the parking lot. You do not get to choreograph the exit and then play the victim of the explosion. That is not how any of this works. And can we talk about the tattoo for a second, because the internet has officially turned that thing into a landmark. Fans are calling it his vibranium visa. They are photoshopping him at the Wakanda border getting denied entry. And you might think the jokes are just jokes, but a meme is a weather report for the culture. When the timeline turns your face into a punchline, the timeline has already decided how your story ends. And right now, the story the culture is telling about Papoose is not the story of a man moving on. It is the story of a man straining so hard to look unbothered that the strain became the headline. What fascinates me is the generational split forming in the comments, because it maps perfectly onto two different versions of hip-hop. The older heads, the mixtape-era loyalists, the ones who bought the DVDs and argued on message boards about whether Papoose ever got his fair shot from the labels, they are riding for him almost unanimously, and honestly, that loyalty is a beautiful hip-hop instinct. But the streaming generation, the clip-first, livestream native audience, they are standing with Remy Ma almost to a person because they watch that podcast clip and see something completely different. They see a legend being publicly diminished by a girlfriend holding a microphone she did not earn. Two hip-hops, two value systems, one story. And the collision between them is where this whole thing is really being fought. And then there is the sentence Remy Ma delivered that changed the entire category of this story, because up until that moment, this was a messy divorce. After that moment, it became a betrayal narrative. Remy Ma said she stood by Papoose through everything. Every rumor, every mess, every moment where a lesser partner would have walked. She said she held him down when the streets tried to fold him, protected him at venues, took hits to her own name to shield his. And she said that loyalty was never returned. Not in the marriage. Especially not in the divorce. That is the sentence that took this story out of the gossip lane and parked it on the front page, because betrayal narratives do not die in a news cycle. Betrayal narratives live for months. And this one has barely started breathing. Now I want to slow the temperature down for a moment, because underneath all of this, the diss tracks, the letters from lawyers, the tattoos, the podcast tour, there is an actual family sitting in the middle of this storm. There is a daughter. There is a household. There is a shared history longer than most rap careers. And whatever side you are on, it is worth remembering that you do not spend 20 years tied to a person and walk away without scars. Behind closed doors, when the phones are off and the cameras go dark, there is real grief inside that story, and that part is not content. That part is real life. But real life is exactly why this is not going away, because here is the math Papoose never did. Your brand was never independence. Your brand was devotion. You were not the best lyricist of your era, you were the husband of your era, and that is not an insult, that was the entire value proposition. The culture cast you in a role, and you cannot retire from a role the culture assigned you just because the contract stopped paying. The moment you let the word trash float across that table toward a Bronx legend, the old Papoose ceased to exist, and this new one, the aggrieved ex with the cinematic ink and the talking point girlfriend, has not sold a single record to stand on. You traded the one thing that made you matter for a headline that expired in 48 hours. The curtain is not just pulled back on this act. The curtain is off the rod is off the wall, and everybody in the building can see the stage was empty the whole time. Meanwhile, look at the scoreboard, because the industry has quietly picked a side and it is not his. Producers are reminding the timeline that Remy Ma has vaults of unheard material. Podcast hosts are lining up to book her. Boxing promoters are calling about walkout songs. Sponsors are sliding into her messages. And on the Papoose side of the internet, the temperature is ice cold. The engagement is thinner. The comment counts are smaller. Because when a man loses the room, he does not lose it loudly. He loses it quietly, 1 second at a time, and right now every second of this story is ticking in her direction. So now, with all of that on the table, let me hear from you, because I have 3 questions and I want all 3 answered. First, who wins this narrative war when the dust settles, Papoose with the new ink and the new team, or Remy Ma with the catalog, the composure, and the entire Bronx standing behind her? Second, should Fat Joe step up and say something publicly, or is he right to let family handle family business? And third, the one I actually need answered, is that tattoo a bold new chapter or the single worst career decision of the year? Get in the comments and be specific, because the sharpest takes are getting pinned to the top of this section. And listen, if you made it to this point in the video, you are different, and I appreciate you riding this one all the way out. Make sure that like is in place, make sure you are subscribed, and do not touch that dial, because if even half of what I am hearing behind the scenes about Remy Ma's next move is real, the next video on this channel is going to make this one look calm. The paperwork is still moving, the booth is still warm, and the Bronx is still watching. Check the suggested videos on your screen right now, pick whichever one you want, and I will see you there, because this saga is nowhere near over, and when the next chapter drops, you already know where you are hearing it first.